Hello Soraya and welcome to this, my first video going through your work. Obviously we've got a whole year ahead of us, which is absolutely fantastic, and through that year we'll make sure that we work together on your controlled assessments. So as you get set them by your school, let me know the titles and I will be able to help you there. But you've started off with a past paper question about an inspector calls, and it was about the presentation of the relationship of Sheila Burning and Gerald Croft. The tricky thing with these kind of questions is that they're not what is the relationship between Sheila and Gerald, it's how does Priestley present the relationship. And part of that is looking at the techniques he uses to present the relationship. You know, is it through symbolic use of stage directions? Is it through dialogue? Is it through action? That kind of thing. There are a number of things to get used to with these sort of literature questions, and I've had a look through your work and I can see that you've got a solid understanding of the first thing, which is that all literature, so the inspector calls, which ultimately will be your Unit 1 Section A text, and I'm sure of Mice and Men, let me know if I'm wrong, but of Mice and Men is probably your Unit 1 Section B text. With both of those texts, there is a real need to understand that the characters are not real. They are just used by the writers, the author, the playwright, to present their ideas. And there's a very strong tendency in the exam for students to get carried away writing about the characters and things we learn about the characters and symbolic use of clothing or whatever it is, and to say this tells us this about the character, when actually that isn't what we're looking for. What we're looking for, as you can see in the wording of the question, how does Priestley present, is the writer. So it's very important to write about the writer and use the characters as almost a jumping off point to write about the writer. So in this case, as I can see very positively in your introduction, you've started to show that you're going to do it anyway. We don't really write a lot about Burning or Sheila and Gerald. We just look at Sheila and Gerald and we think about how Priestley is using them to get across his ideas and themes and messages. And with each text that you study, there are writers' ideas and themes. In an inspector calls, as you correctly point out, the main theme is this idea of socialism. But there are smaller themes which you can pick up to do with class distinction, sexual inequality, moral belief, that kind of thing. But the overarching theme is that. With Mice and Men, the overarching themes are fate, loneliness, and the futility of the American dream. So what you do with these questions is you look at the question, whichever character it's pointing at, and then you think, how can I use that as a jumping off point to write about the writer's ideas and themes? So your introduction here is fantastic, and I can see you've already got a really good starting point, because there are no marks for an introduction, but it's useful to have something exactly as you've got, a one sentence which just sort of summarises, look, this is what I'm going to talk about. This is a strong introduction because it goes straight into socialist ideals. Now there is a challenge with this exam, which you can see here in the mark scheme, about the assessment objectives which are assessed in this section. So there are 4 assessment objectives which are assessed across the English literature GCSE. AO1 is really about answering the question and backing up your ideas with quotes. AO2 is using language, structure and form to analyse, so just analysing the words, thinking about when things happen and where, thinking about the importance of it being a play or a novel or whatever. AO3 is about comparisons, and AO4 is about context. What was going on at the time the text was written and why is that important? But there is a challenge here, because as you can see, we're looking at Section A today. Well, Section A, I mean, the whole exam doesn't assess AO3, that doesn't come in until the poetry exam. But Section A doesn't test AO4, context. So you have to find a middle ground Gerald, where you write about Priestley and his ideas on things like socialism, but you don't write about the time the play was written, what was going on at the time with, all the different communism, not communism, sorry, capitalism. You don't write about the fact that when it was written, this was happening post-war. You don't get into any of that. So that's the challenge. So anything you're writing about the time the text was written doesn't get any marks, but you do still have to write about the ideas and themes. Now, of course, in reality, the two can't be separated. Why the writer, the ideas and themes are strongly linked to the context, but we don't write about the context. So we just, don't have to explain that side of it. So having a quick look at your answer, you can see that you've got 4 strong ideas, which I think is about right. This is obviously a 45-minute section of the exam, and I think 4 good ideas is probably good. Your paragraphs are all good length. The exam board would like you to write a lot about a little rather than to write sort of 10 short paragraphs about 10 things. Just choose 3 or 4 main things that you're going to write about. So let's have a look. From the start of the play, Priestley establishes tension between Gerald and Sheila. So that's a nice topic sentence. This undermines the special occasion they're celebrating, which the audience later finds out is Sheila and Gerald's engagement. Priestley creates the tension from Sheila's point of view as she acts with mock aggressiveness towards Gerald. For us watching, this is not typical of a young couple that are supposed to be in love and about to be married. Instead, Sheila seems to disapprove of Gerald when she says, "Go on, Gerald, just you object." The motive for Sheila's contentiousness is not yet revealed to the audience, but Priestley's already raised doubts in our minds of the compatibility of the couple. So a couple of things to say about this paragraph. I think going forward, it is better to have 1, maybe 2 quotations per paragraph. Here you've got 1, 2, 3 quotations, and I think it's a bit too much. I think in a 45-minute exam where you have the text in front of you, you've got to find each quotation you're looking for. You're probably going to find that you spend too much time looking for quotations. Now you could have just had this quote, mock aggressiveness. That would have been enough. You've then, gone along and shown an example of that mock aggressiveness, which isn't really necessary at all. I'm assuming these are quotations, special occasion, mock aggressiveness, and not just your own phrases. If they are your own phrases, we mustn't put them in inverted commas. Been a while since I've read an Inspector Calls. You write a lot about the characters, and then you say this is important, but you don't quite explain why. Now this is, all to do with the way you structure your answer, but what you're basically saying is, and this is important, read on and I'll tell you why. I would be more keen to make sure that each paragraph has a strong explanation that brings it back to Priestley. So I'm going to read on, but then I'm going to tell you what I think you might have put in here, rather than leave it on the sort of cliffhanger, and this is important and I'll show you why in a minute. Priestley increases our doubts when Sheila confronts Gerald with the suspicion that he has been unfaithful, yes, except for last summer when you never came near me. Although an affair is not mentioned, it's clear to us from the hurt and rejection caused by his absence all of last summer that Sheila is alluding to this. What is significant about her accusation is the lack of unity between the couple and trust in their relationship. Priestley purposely presents the couple like this to show that without the moral guidance of socialism and a caring society, relationships are weak and fragile. Sheila and Gerald's relationship is influenced by capitalism, a way of life according to Priestley's play that condones greed and selfishness. Okay, so it sort of feels like between the 2 paragraphs we've got a really strong point with the explanation here that perhaps felt like it might be needed here. A couple of things to point out, and I'm going to create a Word document to sort of keep some notes week by week. You need to embed your quotations so that they become part of your sentence. You did that here with the quotation all of last summer, but you didn't do it here. You just threw the quote in. So you could have, for example, changed it here. Has been unfaithful quote, last summer when you never came near me, and then it would just read as a sentence. The plan with an embedded quotation is that you make the quotation become part of your sentence, and then the result is that the examiner just reads it and it flows as you're reading it, because it's just as if the words from the text are actually your words as well. It's a very sophisticated way of writing to embed the quotations, and it's one of the higher order skills. So that's one target area. The other target area is to have just one quote per paragraph. This ultimately will save you time, and is all that's needed. Again, you had a quote here and then you went further with the quote, and you could have just had all of last summer. Here Sheila is alluding to the hurt and rejection caused by his absence, so you didn't need to repeat the quote. I like this bit here, but I think you could think a little bit about the structure. So this is, so far what you've done here is all language analysis. You're just taking the words from the text and you're, analysing their effect and what they tell us. But what you could do is think about the structure, because it seems that the character of Sheila and Gerald are first presented in a very positive light. The fact that it's their engagement party. And then what happens is Priestley then goes on to undermine that and slowly strip it apart, which is actually what he does all the way through the whole play. Everything starts very positive. Burling is described as being this successful, self-made man, and he's got this amazing house and everything. And then he turns out to be an idiot. He's undermined because he says, the Titanic will never sink. And, he's further undermined when we discover, his part to play, in the sort of situations that unfurl with the suicide. So there is something structurally that the playwright is doing, which is to present an idea, and it may not be an idea we fully buy, but certainly a suggested idea of happiness, and then to undermine it. Now, that would be a much stronger analysis if you started your answer by saying at the beginning they are presented as this, then they are undermined to be shown like this, and this is what Priestley is saying. Because then you're analysing structure. You're thinking about when things happen and why that's important. So all of this explanation of capitalism and all the rest of it is great, but I would have just started by the sort of positives before moving on to the negatives, because as you could say, the point you're making here, that their relationship is not all great, is actually the same point you're making here. Their relationship is not all great. Whereas it would be a stronger answer to say this is how it seems to begin, and then this is how it's undermined. Okay. Just reading this in my head, and then I'm going to talk to you about it, because I've got a bit of a cold. Yeah, okay, so, you're analysing a part of their relationship and then bringing it back to the wider idea and the theme. And I think this is fine. I don't see anything wrong at all in this paragraph. I think you bring it back nicely to the theme. And of course, you're not writing about context, so it wouldn't be right to say, the play was written at this time and this is how an audience would respond then, whereas now an audience would respond in this way. So you see the shift here. So there's another shift, because it did start off positive, go bad, and then ultimately Sheila takes some sort of strength and independence. So you've got the third part of the structure analysis quite nice here. But when you are talking about structure, what happens when things change, name it as structure. So say, Priestley is using structure here because in the ending of the play this happens and the message is this, that sort of thing. Now remember, this idea of post-war society is not awarded in this this exam. You don't write anything about the sort of context, so you've got to link it to the theme but not the context. Good embedded quotation. Yeah, now this paragraph's not bad at all, but what you've got is quite broad analysis of quotations. So what you're doing is you're almost analysing the action rather than any of the language. And what the way to analyse language is to look at just one word in particular, uh, through a quotation and see if you can, um, analyse just one word in the quotation. So for example, you could say here, the use of the word object seems a very formal word, almost reminds us of a courtroom trial, and perhaps hints at the lack of closeness in their relationship. I'm not saying that's necessarily true, but the close word analysis that the exam board love is where you take one word from a quote and talk about why that's important. What you've done mostly in this answer is just sort of analyse the overall effect of a piece of dialogue and an action or a moment. So again, we don't want to bring in the context, but we just want to leave it at the themes, and a nice conclusion as well. Although again, we don't want to worry about post-war Britain. We just want to say he's promoting socialism. So a strong start, definitely. If we take it to the mark scheme. In this question, there were 4 marks for spelling, punctuation and grammar. You would have got 4 out of 4 there, a really nicely written piece. I get the sense this piece probably took you quite a long time to write. Don't be afraid, to just write under the timed conditions of an exam. I'd rather see a piece of work that you did in 45 minutes and then say, oh right, so there's a mistake here or a problem here, or then see a kind of finely crafted, this is the best piece of work I'm capable of. Which leaves me very little to analyse. So you responded to the task very nicely. I think it would have been, I'd say it's a sustained response. I think a considered response, this word considered, would have been think about why things happen where they happen. And I guess the fact that they came across as one thing at the beginning but slowly were undermined to be revealed to be something else is Priestley's way of saying that we can't trust appearances, and whilst upper classes and capitalism might seem to be the sort of the answer to many, when we look closer we see that it's not. Details linked to interpretation, yes, not in the first paragraph, but in the other paragraphs you said, this is my interpretation, socialism, etc., and you linked it to that. You responded to the text well. I think your quotations were good, but you don't need quite so many. You wrote about language in a broad sense, so we really want to see, trying to choose 1 or 2 specific words that seem really important. You didn't write about form, so one of the things about an inspector calls that the exam board is very keen on is that when you're writing about it, you make it clear that you acknowledge it is a piece of drama, and as a piece of drama, it is different to a piece of prose. And one of the ways it's different to a novel, to a piece of prose, is that it has stage directions. So try in your next piece for me to analyse stage directions, to talk about the stage directions in the piece. For example, where these two sit at the table, is that symbolic? What might that show us about them? That kind of thing. And structure you began to analyse at the end, but you need to name it as structure and talk about structure as what it is. So I think, here this was fairly weak in that we didn't really have formal structure and the language was not close language analysis, but you did understand the themes and ideas. So I put you in this band, and I think it's a solid C grade answer. I actually think you should be doing higher tier. Because I think you've got a really strong set of skills at the moment. For a start, your paragraph structure is lovely, your topic sentences, your introductions, your quotation choice is good, although we just need to embed all of them. Your knowledge of being able to link it to themes and ideas is very good. So this would probably get about a C+, I'd imagine. So it's a very good start. But what I'd like you to have a go at next time is to analyse the character of Mr. Burling. So imagine the same question, how does Priestley present Mr. Burling? And I want you to think about how he is at the beginning, the middle and end. I want you to think about all the things I talked about, stage directions that are used to describe him, why are they important. Just have 1 quote per paragraph. Try to choose a specific word to analyse. and make sure that you embed your quotations so they flow as part of the sentence. So if you have a go at that for next week, and well done, a fantastic start, and I look forward to working with you for the rest of the next 12 months. Your exams will be in literally 12 months to the week, so well done.